The story begins as a girl wakes up in another world, but when she looks in the mirror, she realizes she's been reincarnated as her favorite villain named Alicia. We learn that she used to play a video game where Alicia would make the main character suffer, but the girl liked her personality, and she always wanted her to win, because she thought the hero acted too kind and innocent, thinking she wasn't sincere, and was just toying with the prince's emotions. The girl realizes that she's now in the game, and she's glad she was reborn as Alicia, planning to become the greatest villainess in history. She runs through the hallway, and she greets her mother Rose, who realizes that she's acting strange, because she doesn't usually greet people. She sees her brothers training, so she decides to join them, asking her brother Albert to teach her how to use a sword, saying she wants to get stronger. Her other brothers Henry and Alan think she isn't serious, but Albert agrees to teach her, but he tells her she needs to get stronger before she can wield a sword. So he tells her to do 100 sit-ups and 50 push-ups every day, promising to teach her if she can stick to her routine for a week. But he thinks she can't do it, so she tells him not to underestimate her, saying she looks forward to their training. She heads to the library next, where she searches for a book about magic, and we learn that only nobles can cast spells, because commoners don't have mana. The top magic attributes are darkness, fire, light, wind and water, and the nobles who have mastered these elements are known as the 5 great noble families. Alicia belongs to the Williams family, which specializes in dark magic, so she knows that she has talent, but she thinks it's useless if she doesn't train. She continues to search around the library, but she can't find a book about magic, so she decides to read about plants instead. She spends the entire day studying, and she realizes that she was able to finish several books, thinking she must be a genius. After that, we see Alicia as she struggles to complete 50 push-ups, and she realizes that she's incredibly weak, but she refuses to give up on her dream to become the greatest villainess, so she continues to train. The next day, she easily completes 50 push-ups, realizing she has gotten stronger, and she goes to the library after she eats breakfast so that she can continue her reading. She continues to stick to her daily routine, and we see that she's now able to complete 300 push-ups, and she finishes reading countless books, as she realizes that she's making excellent progress. After 7 days, we see Alicia eating with her family, as everyone realizes that she isn't behaving like her usual self, because they're used to her being lazy. They ask her why she's been waking up early, but she refuses to say anything, as she notes that she's acting like a true villain, because she looks like she's plotting something. Albert reveals that he's going on a school tour, and his father mentions that he's already 12, telling him he will enroll in the Magic Academy after 3 years. Alicia knows that she has to wait for him before she can start her training, so she decides to read books in the library until he returns. Later that day, Alicia realizes that Albert is about to come back, so she goes outside, and she sees the love interests of the game. She notes that Eric Hudson can cast fire spells, while Finn Smith uses light magic, and Gail Evans has the wind attribute, while Curtis Kenwood is a user of green magic. But her personal favorite is the king's only son named Duke Seeker, who uses water magic. He ends up with the main character in the game's good ending, and she notes that she likes him the most, but she decides to leave the romance up to the hero. She runs to Albert, who introduces her to the boys, and she knows that she needs to watch her manners to leave a good impression, so she formally introduces herself. Duke reminds her brothers that they need to display their sword skills, and she wants to join them, telling Albert she was able to stick to his workout routine, but he doesn't believe her. They're about to demonstrate their skills, but she suddenly steals his sword, and she kicks a tree, causing an apple to fall, and she cuts it before it reaches the ground. Duke is impressed, and Albert realizes she's serious, so he agrees to teach her. 1 year later, we see Alicia training with her sword, and she realizes that Duke is watching her. We learn that he's been visiting her since she started her training, and as she takes a break, he asks her why she wants to learn swordsmanship. So she explains that she wants to have a powerful grip, and he finds her amusing. Albert interrupts them, and he asks Duke why he visits their house so often, so he explains that he doesn't know, but he appears to be interested in Alicia. We see the heads of the 5 great noble families, as they have a meeting about the village of Loanna, which is filled with criminals, and they know that the villagers are suffering, so they wonder what they should do to improve it. They take a break, and they talk about Alicia, as they mention that the boys find her interesting, and her father tells them she hasn't been acting like her usual self. After some time, Finn welcomes Alicia to his house, and he leads her to a room where she sees the boys, so she wonders what they're doing there. She sees a map, as she recalls that her character will be exiled to a foreign country at the end of the game, and the king joins them, saying he's there because he wants to talk to her. He asks her what she thinks about their kingdom of Durkis, and she becomes confused, wondering why he's asking her about politics, because she's just 8 years old. She thinks God is testing her, because he wants to see if she will be a great villain, so she tells the king that she can't call Durkis a good nation, because there's a serious wealth gap between the rich and the poor. She mentions that the people in Loanna are so poor that they can barely afford food, and she thinks the commoners are starting to hate the nobles, so they might start a rebellion. The king asks her how they can fix the economy, so she suggests taking advantage of their neighbor Calvera, saying they should help fund their independence, so that Calvera will owe them a debt. She thinks this will give them an advantage while trading with Calvera, and the king seems to like her idea, but she thinks she's acting like a true villain, because she told him to use other people to make money. He bids her farewell, and he leaves the room, realizing she's an interesting person, but his companion tells him they need to talk, because the golden rose has been found. After that, we see Alicia eating her favorite desserts, as Duke stares at her, and the boys think he likes her. Alicia prepares to go home, but Duke gives her a gift, and she can't believe it's a diamond, as she notes that it's ridiculously expensive, so she wonders why he decided to give it to her. Meanwhile, the heads of the 5 great noble families hold another meeting, and they see the golden rose, realizing it belongs to a baker, and it bloomed after his daughter was born. So they think she must be the saint, who's destined to join the kingdom's ruler and bring peace to the world. They mention that a special rose blooms when someone who will control the kingdom's fate is born, and we learn that a blue rose bloomed for Duke. The king thinks he's destined to join the saint, and they will make the kingdom prosper together. But he notes that it usually comes at a price, thinking the kingdom is about to experience difficult times, but he knows that when the saint fulfills her destiny, they have no choice but to accept their fate. We see Alicia as she thinks about going to Loanna, because she wants to see what the situation is like, but she knows that her father will never give her permission, so she decides to sneak out. That evening, we see her walking through a forest, as she notes that Loanna is enclosed with a magical barrier to prevent the criminals from getting out, but she knows that her magic will allow her to pass through it. She reaches the village, and she realizes that it smells terrible, as she sees homeless people sleeping on the ground. She thinks they're going to kill her if they find out she's a noble, and a man suddenly appears behind her, so she pulls out her knife. But she realizes that he's blind, and he tells her to calm down, saying she will attract attention if the people see her holding a knife. He knows that she's an outsider, so he asks her what she's doing there, and she explains that she wanted to see Loanna with her own eyes. He leads her to his house, where he introduces himself as William, and he knows that she's a noble, so she wonders how he found out. He explains that his senses allow him to learn things about her, revealing that he found out she was carrying a weapon by listening to the sound of her footsteps. He realized that she's an outsider because she smells different from the villagers, and since she was able to pass through the magical barrier, he knows that she's a noble. He reveals that he used to work at the castle, but he angered a noble with his language, so he lost his sight and was banished to the village. She can't believe he was banished from the castle because she thinks he's a good man, and she asks him if he hates nobles. So he explains that he does, but he knows that not all nobles are the same. He asks her why she wanted to see the village, so she tells him her story, and she even mentions her dream of becoming the greatest villain. Before she leaves, she tells him she will visit him again, and he thinks it's too dangerous, but she insists, so he tells her to visit him at night. 1 year later, we see that Alicia is still sticking to her usual routine, and she's been visiting William during her free time. We learn that Albert entered the Magic Academy, and she thinks the main character has already met Duke, so she's excited to meet her. Eric invites her to walk around the town, and Henry decides to join them, saying he can't leave the two of them alone. They enter a plant shop, where they meet the shopkeeper Paul, who mentions that he sells medicinal herbs, and he reveals that his family specializes in green magic. So Alicia realizes he's a noble, but he tells her he has a low rank, and he mentions that plants can cure illness and heal the soul, saying he wants to use his knowledge to help people, so he decided to open his shop. He shows her a Josia plant, and she knows that it's priceless, because it can bring down a fever in an instant. He realizes that she's knowledgeable, so he asks her if she's also into plants, but she tells him it's common knowledge. We learn that she read about it, but she wants to act like a true villain, so she tries to look arrogant, but he just laughs at her, so she realizes she needs to work on her acting. After that, they meet the other boys, and Curtis thinks Eric is lucky to have a date with Alicia, telling her to go out with him next time. He asks her what she wants to do, so she reveals that she wants to take the swordsmanship test, because she wants to see how much stronger she has become. Albert reminds her that she's a 10-year-old girl, but she tells him it doesn't matter, saying her brothers took the test when they were around her age, and she mentions that girls are allowed to become swordsmen. But he still refuses to give her permission, so she tells him to give her a good reason, but he screams at her to stop. He immediately apologizes, but she tells him she won't back down, and she walks away, thinking her reaction was perfect for a villainess. The next day, Alicia hears Albert and her father talking about her, so she interrupts them, telling them to stop treating her as a child. But her father reminds her that she's still a minor, saying he's just worried because she's his only daughter, and he promises to let her take the test when she turns 15. After she leaves, he reveals that he doesn't want to give her permission because he knows that she's an excellent swordsman, so she'll attract attention if she takes the test. But Albert reminds him that the 5 great noble families already know how brilliant she is, so he thinks everyone's going to find out that she's a genius, but her father still wants her to live a normal life as a child. We see Alicia in her room as she thinks about how she can't afford to waste time because she wants to become the greatest villainess in the world, and she decides to visit William. She returns to Loanna as she notes that it's her first time visiting him during the day, but she realizes that everyone in the village is suffering. She sees a boy getting beat up, and he suddenly stops moving, so she freaks out, thinking he's already dead. But William appears behind her, asking her what she's doing there during the day, and she mentions that she wants to save the boy, but he tells her there's nothing she can do against the thugs. They decide to treat the boy's wounds, but William thinks he won't make it, saying there are no medicines available in the village. He reveals that he knows the boy, revealing that he's a 6-year-old orphan, and William knows that he's brilliant, thinking he has a bright future ahead of him if he receives proper education. But he mentions that Loanna is like a prison, and even the children born in the village are branded as criminals. Alicia returns home as she realizes how blessed she is because she has everything she needs, and she thinks about the boy, thinking she shouldn't help him because she's a villain. But she knows that the heroine would save him, and she thinks she can't become the greatest villain if she can't do anything that the main character can do. So she visits Paul's shop, telling him she wants to buy the Josiah, and he asks her why she needs it, but she doesn't want to tell him the reason. He gives it to her anyway, telling her to dissolve it in water, and she's about to pay him, but he tells her it's free, telling her to continue visiting his shop. Alicia gives the Josiah to the boy, and William notes that it didn't heal his wounds, but he thinks it should keep him alive. She mentions that she can't become the greatest villain if she can't take action when it counts, and she decides to work even harder to achieve her goal, but William wonders why she calls herself a villain. We see Alicia in the library as she thinks about mastering magic to achieve her goal, and an entire section suddenly appears. She checks it out, and she realizes that it's filled with books about magic, so she reads them, and she learns that magic has different levels. Most nobles can't use spells beyond level 50 because it requires the mana of the 5 great noble families, and the highest level ever recorded is 100. She recalls that in the game, the heroine and Duke were able to go beyond that level, and she thinks she can never be as strong as the main character, but she still wants to do her best. She decides to start with level 1 magic, and she's able to make a book float. So she celebrates, but it ends up hitting her in the face, and she realizes that she has a long way to go. A few days later, we see that she can now use level 5 magic to move the bookshelves, but she becomes exhausted, realizing she isn't feeling well because she hasn't been getting enough sleep. Her father interrupts her, telling her the king wants to meet her, and she thinks she's about to be tested once again. She greets the king as she realizes that he arrived with the heads of the 5 great noble families, and he once again asks her what she thinks about the kingdom. So she tells him she hates the preferential treatment of nobles, saying they shouldn't be given high-ranking positions just because of their status. She mentions that mana has nothing to do with politics, so commoners should also be given opportunities, thinking their talents are being wasted because of the class system. The king asks her if she's willing to surrender her status to the commoners, and she tells him she doesn't mind, saying she wants to give a chance to more talented individuals. After that, Alicia thinks about her answers, wondering if she sounded like a villain, but she suddenly collapses, and Duke catches her, realizing she has a fever. He carries her to her room, where he tells her to drink medicine, but he realizes that she can't, so he kisses her to feed her the medicine. The next day, Alicia realizes that her fever is gone, and she thinks about how Duke kissed her, so she becomes flustered, but she thinks he just did it to save her life. She wants to meet the heroine, thinking she has already enrolled in the Magic Academy, so she decides to sneak into the campus. But she ends up getting lost, and she thinks about asking for directions, but she knows that she'll get thrown out, because she shouldn't even be there in the first place. A girl suddenly appears behind her, asking her if she's lost, and she introduces herself as Liz Cather. Alicia realizes that her name sounds familiar, and she reveals that she's a commoner, saying her family owns a bakery, so Alicia realizes she's the hero. She asks Alicia where she's trying to go, so she reveals she wants to reach the school building. Liz shows her the way, as Alicia notes that she was able to enter the school with a scholarship, but the nobles never treated her well, because she's just a commoner. Alicia knows that she's still no match for her, but she's determined to become her equal. Liz's friends suddenly call her, and she tells them she found someone who was lost, but she realizes that Alicia has disappeared. We see her hiding behind the school building, as she notes that she now owes the hero for leading her there, so she thinks she has failed as a villainess. She sees Duke approaching, and Liz tells him about what happened, as the girls talk about them, thinking they look like a perfect couple, and Alicia notes that if they follow the game's story, they're going to end up together. The classes begin, and she sneaks into the building, realizing there are countless books about magic. She sees a question about politics posted on a blackboard, and we cut to a classroom, where we see students talking about a girl who's answering the question of the week. They can't believe she can answer it, because it's extremely difficult, and they start describing her, as Albert realizes that they're talking about Alicia. We see her writing on the blackboard, and everyone reads her answer, realizing she wants the kingdom to pretend that they're helping a poor country, so that they can take advantage of them. She knows that her answer sounds evil, but she sees Albert watching her, and he scolds her for sneaking into the campus. After that, she hears her father Arnold talking to a noble named Joan, and she decides to listen in, as they start talking about a divergent, saying they need to be careful of a girl, because her abilities are out of this world. She accidentally opens the door, and they realize that she was listening to them, so Joan thinks they need to erase her memories. But she promises not to tell anyone that Liz is a divergent, knowing they were talking about her, because everyone thought she was dangerous in the game. Alicia tells Joan not to worry about her, because she seems like a good person, so he asks Alicia if she has already met her, but she explains that it's just a gut feeling. The next day, we see Alicia using a spell that cleans dirty items, and she realizes that she can already use level 10 dark magic. She wants to learn a level 25 spell, which will allow her to purify Loana's drinking water, but she knows that she still has a long way to go. Albert tells her she has visitors, and she realizes that Liz is one of them. She mentions that she helped Alicia when she got lost in the campus, and Liz reminds Albert that he helped her during the entrance ceremony, so she thinks fate brought them together. Alicia realizes that Albert is into her, and Duke tells her to sit beside him. The boys start talking about what their class will do during the school fair, saying people from outside the school will be attending, and they ask Alicia for suggestions. She knows that Duke and Liz will grow closer during the event, and she wants to get in their way, since she's the villain, but she can't think of her next move. She mentions that Liz can use all of the magical elements, so she suggests using her magic for their performance, thinking Liz will hate the idea, because she doesn't like showing off her powers. But she actually likes the idea, and the boys think everyone will enjoy her performance. She tells Alicia to join her on stage, but she refuses, saying she doesn't want to perform with her. She thinks they can't be friends, because they'll never get along, but Liz thinks it's possible if they keep hanging out, and Albert tells Alicia to spend time with her. So they spend the rest of the day together, and they start talking about random topics, but Alicia finds her boring, because she keeps asking her generic questions. Alicia uses her magic to grab a flower vase, and she mentions that marguerite daisies are perfect for Liz, because it represents sincerity and trust. But the boys can't believe she can already use magic, since she's only 10, thinking she must be a divergent. Albert tells her to return to her room, and she becomes confused because she thought Liz was the divergent, and Liz thanks her for the flowers, saying they're her favorites. Alicia visits William, telling him she can use beginner-level magic, but he tells her that people can only use magic when they turn 13, saying he knows someone like her, who was able to use level 80 magic at a young age. But he lost his ability to use magic, because he tried to use a level 100 spell, and his mana raged out of control, so William tells her not to rush when trying to learn magic. The boy named Gil wakes up, and William introduces him to Alicia, saying she was the one who prepared medicine for him. She greets him, but he ignores her, as William tells her that his past experiences have driven him to avoid people. She thinks Liz would use her kind words to open up his heart, and she wants to be able to do anything Liz can do. So she tells him he's better off dead, because he needs to talk to people while he's alive, but he tells her she'll never understand how he feels. She admits that they grew up in different worlds, so she'll never understand him, but she needs to take responsibility for giving him medicine. So she threatens to kill him, asking him if he still wants to live, and she uses dark magic as he throws his pillow at her, but she cleans it with her spell. He tells her he won't go down without a fight, and she promises to keep him alive as long as he holds on to that feeling, saying she can help him leave the village if he wants to. He asks her why she's helping him, so she explains that she wants to use him, thinking he will be an excellent resource because she knows he's gifted. She mentions that she's the villain, but he asks William what she's talking about, and he explains that she's a weirdo, but she's actually a good person. So Gil promises to serve her, and he thanks her for the medicine. We see the heads of the 5 great noble families holding a meeting, as Arnold wonders if Alicia is actually the saint. But the king thinks it's Liz, because she can use all of the magical elements despite being a commoner, thinking she's more talented than Alicia. But he tells Joan and Arnold to look over Alicia, because she might lose control of her mana. Meanwhile, Albert tells Alicia that Liz's mana went out of control while she was practicing for their performance. Alicia wonders if she can still use magic, so he tells her that the teachers were able to bring her mana back under control. But he wonders if Alicia knew this was going to happen, so she explains that she wasn't, saying she wants to beat her in a fair fight. Alicia arranges the books using her magic, and Joan and Arnold are impressed. They tell her the king ordered them to help her train, and they mention that they will make an exception for her, telling her she will be allowed to enter the Magic Academy at the age of 13. 3 years later, Alicia meets the king, as Joan tells him she's making excellent progress. She reveals that she can now use level 80 spells, and he admits that she surpassed his expectations, so he allows her to enter the Magic Academy, but he asks for a favor, asking her if she can watch over Liz. But that's where this video ends. Let me know if you'd like to see more of this series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.